Hi, this is Kevin. Today I'm going to show you how to create an a cappella version of your favorite pop song. Now you might be aware of this technique that I'm going to show you already, but I want to show you a slight variation which will, I hope, work a little bit better than some of the other techniques that you'll find videos for. What I've got here is a copy of Sean Kingston's Fire Burning. This is the usual radio edit, and this is the instrumental edit. Now the instrumental, as you can see, is shorter, about 15 seconds shorter than the radio edit. Secondly, it's very difficult to see where the two tracks actually match up. So if we're using the inversion or phase cancellation technique to try to create an a cappella of this, it'll be difficult to align the two tracks correctly. The other thing I want to show you is if I zoom in at any point, this is the instrumental. It's one that I got off the internet, and I'm going to zoom in so that we can see a bit more clearly. Now it should be possible to tell from just looking at this that it's got a fair amount of clipping. And if I zoom in at practically any point, let me just select that area there and zoom in, you can tell just by looking at it during the production of this file, some pretty serious clipping has taken place there. I'm just going to zoom in a bit more. You can see all these areas where we've got what we've got here, the normal peaks and troughs, and then we've got these flat areas which indicate that some clipping has taken place. Now where you've got clipping, you've got a real problem as far as trying to create an a cappella mix is concerned. We would have a problem not only trying to align the two tracks together, but even if we align them perfectly, because of that clipping, we would get a very, very noisy, distorted sounding a cappella. This is something I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't recommend getting tracks from the internet which you don't know how good the quality is. Now this is another track that I worked on. This is a track called Bone Thugs and Harmony, The Crossroads. This is a rap track, and what I've done is to get the MP3s from the original CD single, so they're pretty good quality. And what I've done is that I've created this a cappella mix here, and as you can see, if I just zoom in on that track, you can see that what we've got here is a fairly quiet looking track, which is basically a mix of these two tracks. I've mixed the two tracks down, and as you can see, it's created a quieter track, and that's usually a very good indication of success when you're trying to create an a cappella mix. At the end there, things have gone a little bit awry, and also at the beginning there, and I've found out exactly why that was, and I've managed to fix it. But what I also found was that using MP3s, I didn't get a perfect result. There was still a bit of noise, not as much noise as I had with the Sean Kingston, because as you can see, there's very little clipping with these two tracks, but there was still some noise there, and I think the noise is coming from the fact that I'm using MP3s rather than a more pure audio source. So that's what I want to try to fix in this particular video. So here we are in my favorite audio CD ripping software, Audio Grabber. Audio Grabber is completely free of charge. You can use whatever CD ripping software you normally use, but these are the important settings. First of all, it's possible for me to rip this into an MP3 file. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to grab or rip it to a WAV file, which is uncompressed, unlike an MP3. That should give much better quality than an MP3. So I'm going to say OK to that, and you can see this is not ticked, so we're not going to be using the MP3 file at all. The other thing is there are a lot of options which are to do with the sort of volume that you're going to get during the track. You can use what's known as compression, which allows you to level off the volume to a certain extent, making the quiet bits louder and the loud bits quieter. The quiet bits louder and the loud bits quieter, that's correct, yeah. And this might be called in some software leveling, and it's something that you can do on each track, or you can do it across an album. Now, you absolutely don't want any kind of compression or leveling, so make sure that that is not selected. The other thing is normalization. With Audio Grabber, you can set normalization to fairly, well, to fairly specific standards. There are all sorts of options. Now, the other thing I want to do is to ensure that there is no clipping, as we had with the instrumental of the Sean Kingston. Now, if I'm afraid of clipping at all, I can use normalizing, and I can set a peak level of around, say, 90% or 95%. And that should allow me to get a pretty good rip without any clipping at all. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set it at 95%, and I'm going to say OK to that. But I don't want anything else. I don't want any compression, leveling, or anything else. I just want the basic normalization. In actual fact, I think I can get away without normalizing this particular CD, because I know that it's not too loud. I know I'm not going to get serious clipping, so I'm going to deselect the normalization. I'm just going to go ahead with the absolutely pure copy of the CD. So I'm going to say hit OK. We've got no MP3 and no normalization. And if we get a little bit of clipping, I'm not going to be too worried about that. I've already tested it, and the clipping is not too serious. Now, with this particular software, I can choose FreeDB, and it should come up with the names of the tracks. So there we are. We've got the Crossroads, DJ Unique Small Thug remix, and the instrumental version, and it's giving us 3 minutes 49, 3 minutes and 47. So slight amount of difference in the timing. That's going to affect things, but it's not going to be a huge headache when we're trying to align the two tracks. So I'm going to grab those. So I'm back in Audacity. We've got the two ripped tracks here, and as you can see, they're both WAV files, not MP3s, and I'm going to import both of them into Audacity. What I'm going to do, I'm going to mention I'm using Audacity software. It's freely available. If you haven't got it, you just Google Audacity. And I'm also using the multi-mode tool, which is a little bit easier to use than all the other tools, because it combines all the other functions. So if I give you any keyboard shortcuts, it'll be for the multi-tool mode. But you can use the individual tools if you find that easier. So what I'm going to do first of all is to go to the beginning and see what we've got there. So I'm just going to zoom in, and as you can see, there is a slight discrepancy as to where the two tracks start. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually move this track until it coincides with this one. So I'm just going to go there, hold down Control, and that allows me to use the time shift tool to move this track along. And yeah, we don't need to be too fussy at the moment about them aligning perfectly. The other thing I'm going to mention, I'm not going to play a preview of this for copyright reasons. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle and see if we've got, see what sort of alignment that we've got there. And as you can see, we've got a pretty good alignment. You don't need to be a pattern recognition expert to see that we've got the tracks have lined up pretty nicely. The other thing, I'm gonna zoom out, and you can see we've got very little clipping there. If the clipping was anything more than this, I would want to go back and choose a normalization of around 95 or 90% to make sure we had less clipping than that. What I would normally do, and I'm not going to do that for reasons I've already explained, I would normally just hit the play button and preview what it sounds like. And what I'll be looking for is any kind of echoing. And if there was any echoing at all, I would go in and shift the tracks so that they were slightly better aligned. And holding down Control and using the mouse wheel allows me to zoom in. And we can then use Control and the left mouse button to shift the tracks until they're slightly better aligned. Again, what I would normally do is to play the track, listen for any echoing, and make a few more minor adjustments until I wasn't able to hear any echoing. Now if I zoom in a bit more, this is the kind of level of alignment that you would get when you no longer hear any echoing. Right, the other thing I want to point out is that this track here is a stereo track. So we've got the left channel and the right channel, and this is obviously also a stereo track. We've got the left channel there and the right channel too. So what we're doing is trying to align this channel with this channel, and when we do that, this channel should automatically align with that channel. So what I'm going to do is to choose an area, and if I zoom out again, you see that I'm working on an area where there is the start of a beat. It's always a good idea to work on an area where there is a beat, because you'll get, in that sort of area, you get these sharp, pointy peaks and troughs, and those are a lot easier to align than something which is a bit softer. So I'm going to zoom in to that area there, and what I'm trying to do is to get a sequence of peaks and troughs matching exactly with the sequence of peaks and troughs down there. And this is not going to work. This is this is a bit too soft, so I'm going to zoom out again and choose a slightly different area. And it seems to me as though what we've got is a peak there, another peak, and another peak, all rising. And I think this matches up with these 4 peaks in this channel here. So let me see if I can find one very clear prominent peak and get a match. These are all fairly rounded, and I'm not going to get a good match, but if I come down here, we've got a very obvious peak there which seems to match up with that peak there, and it looks as though we've got a perfect alignment there and there. And that's exactly what we're aiming for. We're aiming not for a good alignment, but for a perfect alignment, because we need a perfect alignment to get the best quality sound that we need. Now, it's as well to note that there are 44,000 of these dots for every second. But using Audacity, and Audacity is fantastic for this kind of work, it should be possible to get the perfect match. I'm going to zoom out again, so just take a bit of a wider look just to convince myself that I'm not imagining things. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in on this area here and see if I've got a match there. Now we've got, that's the bottom point there, and that should really match up with the bottom point there, and it doesn't. But if I look at this point here, oops, I don't want to do that. Let me Control Z. If I look at that point there, that's the high point, and that matches up with the high point there. So when you do this kind of thing, you're not going to get a perfect result each and every time. It's not going to be perfect because the 2 tracks are subtly different. But the more points you get where it seems to match up fine, the more likely it is that you've got the perfect match, and you're trying to get, you're trying to find the exact match, one sample in 44,000 samples every second. I think that's the perfect match there, so I'm going to zoom out. And the next thing I'm going to do is to highlight one of the tracks. In this case, I'm just going to highlight the instrumental. I'm going to go to Effects, Invert. So that's inverted this track, and we should now be able to get the 2 tracks to cancel out. What I'm actually going to do is to Control A, select everything on the screen, Control D, duplicate it, and I'm just going to shrink these 2 tracks, so they're out of the way. And then I'm going to select the bottom two tracks, mix and render, and these two should now mix into one track. And as you can see there, it looks like we've got a pretty good match because the amplitude has fallen dramatically in the area that we were working on. Towards the end there, things haven't quite worked out. There's obviously a bit of a mismatch. At some point the tracks are out of alignment in this area here, and the same goes for that. You remember in Audio Grabber there was a 2-second difference between the two tracks. Well, that explains that. There's obviously a point where the tracks diverge slightly in terms of the precise alignment. And what you'd need to do is to, at this stage, go save project, and you can save your project using any name. The other thing I want to point out is that when you save projects, when you save Audacity projects, you can save a project or you can save compressed copy of the project. Always choose save project. I don't know what the compressed copy of the project does in terms of the loss, non-lossy situation. So I never use the compressed copy of the project unless I'm really sure that I don't mind losing a bit of quality. But when you save as an Audacity project, you get the same quality, exactly the same quality as when you save as a WAV file. The Audacity projects are uncompressed, and therefore you always get very high quality. Now what we can do once we've saved the project is that we can actually zoom in on this area here. I'm just going to shrink this particular file and expand that one and that one. Just zoom out a little bit. This is the area where we haven't got a good alignment. So what I would normally do is to highlight that area, zoom in, and then do exactly the same thing as I did before. Try to get a perfect alignment. But I've actually already done this, and what I found was that I was able to get a pretty good Acapella version of the track here, and also I was able to get a decent Acapella towards the end there as well. So what you find when you play back the Acapella versions is that you've got very strong, clear vocals. You don't have noise, and that's the important thing when you use this technique. You don't get the noise that you get with other techniques. You get very strong, clear vocals, a little bit of percussion coming through. You always get a little bit of percussion, but you get strong, clear vocals, good Acapella, and you know, you can do a bit more work on it to try and get the Acapella sounding even cleaner. Personally, I prefer to leave it just as it is and to use it even with a little bit of percussion there. But yeah, that's basically the technique. Always use the uncompressed audio, not the MP3 files, and always make sure that you haven't got any clipped audio. And when you save, make sure that you save as Audacity projects, because that way when you open them up again, you'll still get the precise same quality that you were working with originally. So hopefully you'll be able to make very good Acapellas. Yeah, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy that. Take care, bye.